Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Can you see me? There we go. My name is Cindy, as many of you may know. For those of you joining us for the first time, thank you. Welcome back to everyone else to another edition of Stone Soup here at What's the Word. My name is Cindy Beasley again. I am the supervising editor and director of content development here at What's the Word TV. I am also the creative director and CEO of Morally Sinful Productions. And last but not least, I am the creative director and executive producer over at Sincerely Richard. So as many of you may recall, Stone Soup is a fable about hungry strangers convincing the people of a town to pull together different foods that they have to create a meal that everyone could enjoy and eat from. So ultimately, it's a story about sharing. We took that moral of sharing and the fable of Stone Soup and applied it here at What's the Word to create a series where we bring together different professionals, different influencers of all backgrounds to provide resources and information that as a culture, we can all eat from, we can grow from, and we can share with each other. So with that, I'd like to jump right into the very first segment of this evening, which is the protest aftermath, triumphs and trials to go, bringing in our lovely panelists. First, we have Miss Ashley Munson. Hi, Ashley. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, can't complain.
Good.
We have Mr. Domity Pongo. Hey, Domity.
Hey, what's up, Cindy? How you doing?
Well, how are you?
I'm good. Ashley, good to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
So Ashley is a community activism lead organizer for March 1st, 2020. Domity is the host of MTV News, and a wonderful journalist. And last but not least, joining us in this segment is Mr. Christopher Crater. Hi, Chris. How are you?
All right. I'm doing well. How are you? How y'all doing, everybody?
Hey.
And Chris is joining us. He's the community engagement associate at the Obama Foundation, as well as an educator. So now that we're all acquainted and we understand what we're going to be talking about this evening, I kind of like to just jump right into it. So we've been seeing an uproar of protests and riots since the murder of George Floyd. It's not the first time in our history that we've seen something like this, but for this generation, it kind of feels like something new. It feels like, okay, what's going on? Where do we go from here? And I think something that's important to touch on before we delve into a lot of it is the difference between protesting and rioting. So from my understanding, protests, and especially when I look it up and find the politically correct definitions, a protest is a right. It's affiliated with peace and organization, versus rioting is more affiliated with crime and destruction, whether it's vandalism, and that's where the looting comes in. Any of you refute that or want to add to either of the definitions?
No, those definitions sound appropriate. I just want to call out that the interesting thing about the definition of a protest is that the only thing it leaves out is that a real protest has to be inconvenient in order for it to be effective. And I think that a lot of times white news outlets and white supremacists tend to use the word protest as a way to say that, they would like to keep us confined. They would like to keep these things polite. We got to remember that Martin Luther King's nonviolent protest was still inconvenient as hell. And it still was angering people back then. So that's the only thing I would add.
And I appreciate that, because I think that's the perfect segue. And we can start with Ashley on this as the lead organizer of an actual protest, of a march. Can you talk to us about what goes into effective planning for such an event and why protests and marches are imperative in the fight for justice?
That's loaded. Well, first, thanks for having me and pleasure to meet you both. And so I don't know where to start. I think where the need came from, it started with a tweet. I was doing some research on rioting and protesting because my opinion on things have shifted, and we can talk about that a little bit, but just the difference between the two, rioting and then protesting and then looking at looting, and how all of it has basically been the gateway for change in America over time, which is a different conversation. But I was doing some research and I tweeted, I was like, hey, what about a Million Man March? And I woke up the next day and I just got a lot of feedback from a lot of different people about let's do it. So we had 11 days to plan it.
Wow.
And to your point, don't say your name for me again. Okay, just make sure I said it right.
Yeah.
I harassed the police, the Chicago Police Department. I told them we're doing this. I told them why we're doing it. And I got a lot of pushback at first. And while I was super frustrated with, because we didn't have a permit, because they're not allowing permits during this time of COVID. I had a lot of people that did not want to collaborate, and that's a whole different discussion. But I made sure that it was still inconvenient, but that we were trying to do our best to keep people safe because of COVID, and to make sure that we're doing as best as possible to collaborate with other organizations. So it's a lot that went into it from an organizational standpoint, being on the ground, learning the true politics of Chicago. So yeah, I mean, specifically focusing on putting people on the ground to do the work was the biggest thing. But in the end, it was an amazing experience. We had people from all over. We had about 5,000 people come out, where the atmosphere was just amazing. It was no looting. It was nothing like that. It was just a good time with all types of people celebrating us and celebrating what that day meant to us.
Nice. So why or how do you feel rather that marches and protests are imperative in the fight for justice? So we understand that there's a lot that goes into it, but why is it so necessary?
I mean, if you look at history, things rarely, what is the quote? Well-behaved women
rarely make history.
Make history, right? And when you think about protests and marches, we have to make people hear us. And everybody has their fight. Don't get me wrong. Some people want to be lawyers. Some people want to change policy. Some people want to be on the front line. So whatever your fight is, do that. But it all goes hand in hand. Like, everybody has their part to play. And so to the point that I made earlier, I had a different stand. I do not condone looting. However, this whole wave has shifted my mindset because people are angry. It has been over 400 years of disenfranchisement, treating a race and a culture as less than human. And so people are upset. And while I do not condone looting or any violence, you have to understand the rioting is the language of the unheard, right? And so if we continue in this direction, it will get worse. But if we stop and listen and use everybody's fight to make a difference, I think we'll be better off.
I appreciate that. So I'd like to bring in Chris and Domity a little bit. Ashley mentioned she does not condone looting, but she understands, the anger that's inside of a lot of us as an oppressed people. How do you all feel about that? Do you think that it's important that we judge the intent versus the action of the looters and the rioters, or is it kind of just black or white for you? And we can start with Domity.
You said a lot when you brought in intent. I'm like, man, that's a deep question, because I'm still evolving on this. First of all, I guess the disclaimer for all of us, where I speak for myself with platforms, is it's responsible to say I don't support looting, I don't promote it, but I definitely understand it. And I don't really mind the intent behind it, right? And the reason I say I don't care about the intent is because it all stems from the same place. You had looters out there who were breaking things because they were angry. In the few instances that there was looting, you had looters out there breaking stuff because they were angry. You had looters that were just venting frustration from being locked up due to quarantine all this time. You had white folk who was just out there to be agent provocateur. You had folks from the FBI, I believe, who was sent to sow discord and confusion. And there are multiple videos that suggest this. I have to say suggest because I don't 100%, I haven't verified these videos individually. And then you got folks that just want some new shoes and want something for the crib. And all of them, some of those folks are doing that because they're impoverished, and some of those folks are just doing it because they want free things. The reason I say the intent doesn't matter is because none of that would be possible. None of that would have happened if someone didn't kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 40 seconds. So whatever is going to happen is going to disrupt this system, that's going to disrupt and interrupt the status quo. I'm all for it and I welcome it. I think what's interesting about rioting, as we were debating the merits or the dismerits of rioting, I watched news organizations time and time, all of them make announcements. We're now capitalizing the being black. And not only are we capitalizing the being black, we're going to tell you that black isn't just a color or an identity, but it's relating to the African diaspora. All this, I'm like, yo, I mean, it opened up rioting in a weird way, at least in my space, opened up the table for the Black folks have been sitting at the table saying these things, and the newsrooms were ignoring them. All of a sudden, they're helping frame the work around the B is the about the Black capitalizing B. And then you got monuments coming down. People said monuments can never come down. This ain't realistic. Blah, 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 blah. You got Breonna's law that came about. You think Breonna's law would have passed that quick if they didn't think we was going to break some stuff up? So I think I think rioting makes you appreciate peaceful protesting. So it's like, yo, we don't want to go back to that. I'm going to respect this peaceful. I'm going to respect Ashley and what she's trying to do, because she didn't even have to come and ask us for permits. So it's
hello.
Yeah, so yeah.
Right. I would love for you to keep newsrooms in your head, because I want to come back to that point, but I want to give Chris the floor.
So definitely I have to back over what my brother said. I mean, I feel the same way. I definitely don't necessarily support the looting, but I understand it. And I know for me, being in my job description, I had an opportunity to be able to reach out to some of the top community activists across the city, right? That Monday after the smoke cleared, right? What do we do next? What comes from it? And usually I'm a person that just runs into action, right? I'm quick to go out and, try to make a difference. But with this, I had to take a step back. And I literally called about 45, community activists that covered, over 40 different communities in the city, just to hear their feedback. Like, how do you feel about it? Or what do you think we should do now? And one of the biggest misconceptions that has come from other people that are not from here, right? They assume that people in Chicago don't care, right? We don't care about the violence. We don't care about the issues. There are people not here doing their work every day. And it's just not true, right? Like I'll fast forward to, this weekend, for instance, right? 4th of July, historically a rough weekend in Chicago, right? The Hit the Hood initiative that My Block, My Hood, My City, and all these different activists, and I know Ashley was involved with that too, right? Like they impact change. Now I know on Monday we saw 80 shot, 15 killed, but it would have been more if it wasn't for that initiative, right? I had an opportunity this weekend to go to 6 of those Hit the Hood initiatives across the city, and to see the pride that so many people were able to display about their neighborhood. And it wasn't just necessarily, the old same activists, right? It was young, it was exciting, and it was a cross community collaboration, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things that have come out of the rioting, right? We can no longer just say it's good for my neighborhood and what I'm doing is working, right? We had to bring everybody together, every community together, to figure out what do you do well and what can I do better. So I come out of the protest feeling encouraged for our city and feeling excited, because I feel like our young people are ignited right now, and looking forward to being able to connect with so many. Just being on this panel today is just so exciting, because we do got a lot of work to do, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
So you mentioned young people and being ignited, and I understand that you are a former teacher at Urban Prep. So as you worked with young men in the very neighborhoods in Chicago that were hit hardest by the looting and by the rioting.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you foresee those neighborhoods recovering? Because if we're going to be candid about it, downtown is back open already.
Yes.
It's already built up. Saks windows are fixed.
Yes.
The west side and south side, not so much. Bringing in a personal touch, I spoke with my mother about it, and she remembers a building from when she was little that is still non-existent, that was burnt down in the previous set of rioting. I won't say the year because she'll get all mad at me. But but seriously, how do you see them recovering, rebuilding? What can young people do to help bring back these resources? Because the city's not going to help us so quickly.
So great question. And one of the most powerful pieces, I think, of that Monday, right after talking to the 40 plus community activists, a lot of my former students start calling me. And they're saying like, man, Mr. Crater, we want to do something, right? I got a broom, but like, I don't know where to go. Or can you find out how I can get some trash cans, right? They were like intentional about saying, we see an issue and we can't wait for somebody to come fix our issue. We have to be the ones to come together. This week, I had a long conversation with Alita Clark, AKA Inglewood Barbie, about some of the initiatives that she's rolled out, right? She, not only is feeding the friends under the viaduct, right? The pandemic hit, she moves into action. She opens a safe house in Inglewood. She's distributing PPE and groceries, right? And even had Mayor Lightfoot come down and distribute groceries on Friday. So like it's powerful. we have to be able to convene with each other, I think, first to figure out what are some of the things that we want to change, right? What do we want to see put in place so that we can do better? Obviously, we definitely have to get, our elected officials involved. I saw, Stephanie Coleman out there. I saw her, and I know that they have been very active in their neighborhoods trying to make sure that we have what we need to keep going. But I think it does start with us, right? The fact that they know that there are young people that are intentional about making sure that, not only downtown is nice, but Inglewood is nice too. And if there were some businesses that were closed or damaged, and we get the things that we need or the resources we need to fix those things. So it's a great question. It's a loaded question. But I think we definitely have to keep applying, we have to keep applying the heat, right? We got to keep convening those spaces and having conversations like this so we can know people in different occupations across, the city that can actually help us bring resources to our community.
And I appreciate that because that's the very goal of us being here this evening. And I think a lot of what you mentioned, young people wanting to get out and clean up, different influencers and professionals around the city creating initiatives, creating opportunities to put food back into some of these food deserts and things like that. We didn't see that on the news. And if we did, very, very lightly. I can recall vivid news clips of the looting, seeing a young Black boy's face plastered on the screen. I mean, I watched it. Fox showed the same clip 6 times of a young man reaching in, snatching a hoodie out of a broken window. So, Domity, I ask you to keep the newsroom in your head because as a journalist, as someone in the media, how do you maintain such a genuine connection to your work, but still present it objectively? Because as the consumers, we know by now that the media has an agenda and we're constantly seeing what they want us to see, not what's always happening. So how do you keep yourself different from that?
I pull from folks who were doing this way before me. That's kind of what helped me out. I had tweeted one time, I was like, yo, imagine if this feels heavy, imagine the weight of what our ancestors felt every single day. Yeah. And I had done, it was the day, I think it was around the time George Floyd was killed. I was trying to figure out how I was going to tell the story the next day. And so I started looking up different writers. I was reading James Baldwin. I was looking up Ida B. Wells. And then I looked at Ida B. Wells had a definition for lynching. Now, when you say that a man was lynched, you think hanging from a tree. And it's just it's jarring. The word lynch kind of, whoa. Is that it's something that news anchors don't use. But if you couch it in historical context and you look at the definition of the word, you look at how Ida B. Wells defined it, and you really bring that into it, no one can refute your work. And so that's what allows me to still maintain a genuine connection to the work because it's fact-based. It's when you're on the side of right, you don't really have to worry. On the side of truth, you don't really have to worry about too much. And so I try to just make sure that my work is true. And I genuinely draw from the ancestors. Like I'm dusting off these books over here. Hold on, wait, what's the other side? Dusting off these books and rereading some of the books that I hadn't read in a few years to kind of figure out how to just continue to get better, looking back to look forward a little better.
And I appreciate that. And I ask because I want those of us who are in the media that are watching, or those of us who aren't, but consume the news often, to understand that you have to be aware of where you're getting your facts from. You have to be aware of who's presenting them.
And you present them too. Like, I think it's I didn't get to the objective. You hear New York is as well. I'm in Brooklyn. It's honking horns. I don't know if y'all can hear that. But getting back to the objective part of your question, the way I present the news, I add my context to it. There's a little opinion in there, but that it's my opinion. You're going to know in the last 30 seconds of that piece that that's my opinion. But in order for us to really have this, we have to add context. You can't talk about rioting without talking about why folks are rioting. You can't say Martin Luther King would have wanted peace without saying what Ashley said, rioting is the language of the unheard. And so the objectivity comes in providing the context. And I remember back when I first got into this field, it seemed like objectivity meant white neutrality. You understand? They used to try to make us feel like if we said something, saying the truth felt radical. Saying a man was lynched seemed like you were being not objective, and it's just a falsehood, you know. So I just want to get to that part of your question as well.
No, I appreciate that, because the context piece is important. And I think that's one of those red flag things for us as consumers or just as people. If you don't have the context, ask for it before you run with the information and believe it. Because again, not everybody takes the time to provide that context, you know, to do their job to a T. You know, a lot of people just do what they got to do to get to the next story. So I appreciate that. And earlier you mentioned Breonna's law, you know, and we can talk about kind of some real results. What are some triumphs that we've seen from these protests, and what are the trials, excuse this little headphone, the trials that we still have to go? So we've seen Breonna's law. However, her killers still aren't arrested. We've seen George Floyd's murderers get arrested, but if I'm not mistaken, most, if not all, are out on bail currently. There have been no arrests in the Elijah McClain case out in Colorado. 3 other officers were fired for taking an insensitive photo, kind of reenacting the scene, but there's been no real accountability for anybody involved in these instances. So I want to open the floor back up to all of you, and Ashley, we can start with you. What do you think that we should make of these happenings? And are there any other notable ones that you would consider as victories from this set of protests?
Difficult to answer. I'll start by saying this. I think one of the good things to come from this is that we have the nation's attention. And while our ancestors have fought and we have made headway, we have folks' attention that they weren't paying attention before. And I think while we're rallying and marching, I think that's good and it's keeping the momentum going. Now we have to focus on what's next. And so like, and you have to go block by block, right? And so my way for background on me, I'm a person of legislation and policy. So I worked in Springfield for the Speaker of the House, currently a lobbyist advocate, but that's my fight. That's how I fight. So now what am I doing? I'm galvanizing all these organizations from community groups that we worked with the march. And we're about to start another nonprofit that basically serves as the liaison from the streets to the State House. We have your attention. Now we're about to write policy that you have to enact, or we're going to make more noise. And so that's kind of a tangent from the question. But I think because we have folks' attention now, it's time to step up and do the work. And one thing that you said or asked earlier about what can communities do, I think we have to take the initiative. And this may sound a little harsh, but we take the initiative to look on Shade Room to see what's going on. But half of us, or a lot of us, don't know our state senator. A lot of us don't know who represents us. And while I get it, everybody does not want to be a politician. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that we take the initiative for what we want to take the initiative for. So in order to move forward and keep the momentum going, we have to do policy. We have to, back in the day, I remember grandmothers on the block, right? They took initiative for making sure like everybody was safe, or you got folks on the block that make sure that everybody was safe and doing what they need to do to go to school. You see somebody out of school, why are you at the corner store? Get your butt back to school, right? And so it's going to take that type of unity and collaboration to work together. And this is the last thing I'll say for this segment. I think we get so distracted by the wrong things that we can't focus on the right things. The right things is that we need to move forward and create policy and hold people accountable. The wrong thing to do is, because Chris says that traditional public school is the way, somebody else says charter public school is the way, does not mean that y'all have to agree. It means for that topic, we don't agree. However, moving our people forward is most important. And however we can educate our Black babies, whether that's Catholic school, private school, magnet school, traditional or non-traditional, we need to educate our babies so we can move forward. So that was loaded, but I think at the foundation of what you asked, I think a triumph is understanding that we have the nation's attention, and people from London, people from all over are listening to us and seeing what we will do from this. Because if we don't keep this momentum going and ride this wave, we'll miss a movement and a shift in what's going on.
I completely agree. And I'd like to jump in, gentlemen, before you provide your feedback. A lot of what Ashley said has me thinking about how we've also been seeing more appreciation for Black culture since this has been going on. You know, we got everybody's attention. Every big company wants to issue a statement about how Black Lives Matters to them. You know, if they don't, then we know how they really feel. We see things like the BET Awards being broadcast on CBS. And I understand that that comes from the CBS and Viacom merger, but that wasn't something that I personally feel, if the nation wasn't where it is right now, they would have done that. You know, like that it just wouldn't have happened. And we have to be honest about those kind of things. We're seeing Black Lives Matter, murals and paintings all on streets and things like that. So I throw that into the conversation to kind of get your mind going. Do you all consider these actions that are kind of just there to pacify us, or do you consider them, you know, some winning moments as well?
Both. I wasn't being rude. I apologize, Ashley, because I was looking at my phone, but there was a graphic I was looking for that had all of the laws that have passed since George Floyd was killed. And I did it on one of my need to know stories. And I've been doing so many stories, I couldn't remember. I was so mad I couldn't find the story. But essentially, there have been a lot of concrete things in the past, nowhere near enough. But what I am seeing is I've got white friends who have been microaggressors, and I use the word friends loosely, I mean white former coworkers. I got folks that I know that have reached out to me to talk about race, and they never have before. Like, they get it. Like, shit I was saying way back when, they're talking about it now, you know, like, and so in a real way, I think that what the industry is doing, like someone commented, said Black lives are also Black dollars. And the industry knows that they have to respect Black life if they want us to still spend our money there. But also, I do genuinely believe that there are some middle managers, that there are a few VPs, there are a few white CEOs that are like, wait a minute, I don't work in law enforcement, but what can I do to change this thing? And so now you're starting to see them do things like, okay, Viacom is like, okay, Bob is like, yeah, let's put BET on CBS. Not only is it a good programming choice, but it also means, yo, the Black coworkers are feeling a weight that I don't understand, and we need to release the valve a little bit. And so I'm seeing those conversations happen internally. Even at Viacom CBS, I moderated the company-wide meeting that we had with Color of Change President Rashad Robinson. And because of the climate we were in, I didn't pull any punches. I had a real ass conversation. Like, it's hopefully we put it on YouTube. I think the whole 30 minutes will be out there. But I don't think I would have ever had the space to have a conversation that specific. You know how we talk when other people in the room? We were talking like that. You know what I mean? So, you know, I'm sorry to be so verbose, but I think that it's both. They're just trying to placate us, but then there are a few folks who are saying, what is the little bit that I can do within my sphere of influence? And so that's why we're not seeing laws change, because we have to wait on the government for that. But we're seeing companies change and some of their practices internally, because folks ain't standing for the status quo right now.
Chris, would you like to chime in?
Same, definitely agree. I think, you know, we will take everything that they got coming our way, right? But we need it coupled with action. And when I think about, like, specifically here in Chicago, with our community leaders that are working so hard on a day-to-day basis, right? Like Diane Latiker in Roseland, she's providing a basketball tournament, but she's also a senior citizen, right? Like, I was at the the grand opening last Tuesday, and, you know, not only is she on the barbecue grill, but she's also doing temperature checks. And, like, we should be able to lift her up, though, right? She shouldn't have to do all that by herself, right? She needs help. And I think that's the part that we can lift her up, right? Like, those big companies that say they want to impact change, they can lift her up, right? We have Antonio Davis and Washington Park, you know, providing a great, you know, service to our young people, right? Help to do that work. We got Vondale Singleton, you know, has a great mentoring program in Greater Grand Crossing for young men, right? He's had several shots since the beginning of the summer. He needs some help. He needs his story amplified. They need dollars to be able to provide these organizations and to keep the great work that they're doing going. I think when we think about, you know, specifically the spike in violence and things that are going on right now, right? This pandemic, you know, it showed us several different things, right? Obviously, that our young people had that digital divide. Some people don't have internet. Some people don't have computers. Some people don't know how to work either, right? We need help And I think this is an opportunity for folks to really ask boots on the ground people, like, what do you need to be successful and to do your job effectively? I mean, like, it's just been amazing to see how all these folks are, you know, whether they have support or not, they're going to be out there every day, and they're intentional about impacting change because they see a better Chicago. So I often say on Mondays, sometimes when I see those numbers, I'm disappointed, but I'm never defeated though, because how can I be when there's so many people working to make our city better?
And there's so much more work to do. I appreciate that. I want to wrap up this segment with action points. You know, I see a question in the comments that I have here. How do we get action? Where do we go? But before that, really quickly though, a lot of what you all said has me thinking about also people in higher ups, or like how Domity mentions, you know, the VPs or just different officials within different organizations. There was a lot of talk about a potential NBA lockout or NFL lockout and what those with power, already in powerful positions, can do to stand up for our rights. And I understand that as of now, it is not happening. There have been other suggestions or solutions per se that they've issued, where I know for the NBA, players will be allowed to wear paraphernalia that has political statements on it. On the court, supposedly Black Lives Matter will be painted. This is kind of stuff we're seeing already though. So how do you all feel that those within the organizations, I don't really want to focus on the celebrities. I don't want to focus on LeBron and KD. I want to focus on, you know, the commissioners, or we can talk about how NFL commissioner Roger Goodell issued an apology and said that he should have listened to the NFL players sooner. What's more realistic to get action for us that they can do, that we should be looking for or hoping for from these organizations? Everybody looks stumped, so I won't even pick. I just let y'all go at y'all freedom.
I'll go first. I think that is a sports. I'm not a sports enthusiast. You know, I watch football when it's on. I watch basketball when it's on. And I think that that's their battle to fight. And I say that because I think that we look to celebrities too much for too much. Yeah. And so I think the impact that those leagues can have is that CEOs in other sectors take their cues from other CEOs. What is Viacom CBS doing? What's NFL doing? Et cetera, et cetera. So when Roger Goodell, you know, says what he says, everybody else is looking at how it's received. And they're seeing that folks are saying, oh, you didn't go far enough because you ain't say anything about Kaepernick. You know, so folks are paying attention to that and they're taking those cues. So it's changing the consciousness in that way. And I think it's in white folks viewing other white folks in power and seeing how we're responding to them. That's the value of it. Other than that, I don't need, you know, these basketball players and these celebrities to save me. I don't think these guys need to be our leaders. I think that they should support the leaders. We need to have folks supporting Ashley, not getting in front of her because they got more Instagram followers or something like that. You know what I'm saying? We need Chris out here getting supported by the guy, the rappers, not the rapper with the podium, at the podium, because he don't know what to say. You know what I'm saying? Like we get mad at celebrities for saying stupid things, but you asking somebody that plays characters on TV for a living to say something intelligent about them, how you gonna ask somebody to pour from an empty cup? You know, so I think that the leadership is paying attention to what other leaders are doing, and I think that that's the value in watching Roger Goodell and all these other folks figure out what they need to do.
Before I chime in, Chris or Ashley, would you all like to say something?
Yeah, I'll go before Chris. Just this one point. I think if we expand the conversation to more corporations like Lyft, Uber, Walgreens, Target, I think what we have to realize is how powerful we are. I read something a while ago that said the Black dollar stays in the Black community for 6 hours. Mm-hmm. 6 hours. When you talk about white people or other races, I think last time I checked, it was about 24 hours, I believe. While that is true, we have the power not only can y'all imagine if all the Black folks in Illinois voted, in Chicago specifically, we have all Black state reps and state senators majority in the city of Chicago, because we're the biggest demographic. So if we take it from a legislative standpoint, then talk about the Black dollar, we're worth I don't want to misquote this, but I think it's like 4 trillion or 4 million, how much money that we actually spend in our community for everything together. Like if we realize the power we have, we can make these corporations change, and they will have to pay attention to us because we're spending our dollars and we're putting our money where our mouth is. So I don't know. I think one thing that I would take away from the Medi said, did I say it right?
Domity.
Yeah. Fancy. I got it. Domity. If we realize the power we have, we can make people pay attention. So that would be the only thing that I would add to that.
Right.
Cool.
That's a big fact.
Chris, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. So, I think Domity made a great point when he was, suggesting like, hey, Ashley's already boots on the ground. She's doing the work, right? What about we, take an Instagram photo of her, right? Or go live on my Instagram because I have 1 million followers and I can lift the work up that she does, right? Honestly, across the country, specifically, I have some friends, NBA, NFL, specifically NBA, they are working from that perspective to try to find out like how can we assist, and not just necessarily be a big money, a monetary thing, but what can we do that can ultimately be sustainable and impact change? And if that's going to Ashley's event, if that's putting her on our social media, if that's giving her the money, then we'll do that. So I have been a part of several conversations that have been to that drumbeat. Like folks are asking different questions. I think beforehand. A few years ago, different organizations would just say, okay, well, where do we drop the money off, or what do we do, whatever. But now people are asking specifically, like, man, who's boots on the ground, who's doing work, and what help do they need to be sustainable and to keep it going? So I have noticed the difference.
I think you all said that perfectly, so I won't even harp or reiterate anything. Kind of shifting into wrapping up this particular segment. Ashley, I can start with you. Do you have any concrete resources or information or tips for viewers and those in our communities to get involved with protesting, or any specific voting resources you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I would say 2 things I'll start with. I think one is actually taking the initiative to find those resources. Like I said, we take the initiative for everything, but I think to cater to that on my end, like I said, I'm starting a nonprofit, and this, people just like to start stuff. The purpose of this nonprofit is really just to elevate the messages that have already been there. I've been on the ground on the policy sector for a while, and now getting into more of the grassroots thing. So state is my bread and butter, but now we're trying to say, okay, so I know state, the ground better than I do. Let's work together to pass legislation. So we're in the process of creating a nonprofit that's called the Illinois Black Collective, where we'll represent Black and Brown organizations throughout Chicago and statewide. And so for that, follow me or follow our March page. It's like info@marchforus2020.com. And we're list building a list of organizations and people who want to volunteer, so we can help other organizations that need the bodies on the ground. So I would say for now, that's what we're working on.
Cool, thank you. And that made me think about when you talk about looking for things, backtracking to your point about the spending power of Black people. It's about 3.6 trillion, if I'm remembering correctly from a video I did with Sincerely Richard, but it's closer to 4 trillion is the point. Look up resources to support Black businesses too. There are Black People Eats. There's a Chicago-based list of all types of Black businesses created by Digital LMB. You can find them on Instagram. From my understanding, Beyonce then created a whole page of Black businesses to shop from. People were going crazy. So whether small or large, the resources are there.
Can I add one more thing before? Sure. So to that point, we're having a town hall at the end of the month where we're just bringing together whoever wants to be there. It's going to be like the old-fashioned town halls, like maybe a lot of yelling and screaming, but at the end of the day, we come to conclusions on what to do next, because marches are happening, everything is happening, but a lot of people are like, okay, this is great, but what do we need to do next? And to your point of Black businesses, we had a lot of Black businesses partnering with us for the march. So we're making sure to send them business and making sure that we're collaborative and not siloed.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. Chris, to kind of wrap it up, as someone who has mentored and just been involved with young people for so long, what is the most vital piece of advice you have for young people? And are there any resources available through the Obama Foundation that maybe viewers can be aware of?
Most definitely. So first and foremost, I want to thank What's the Word for giving us this platform, right? Convening these spaces to have an opportunity to express how we're feeling. I think it's powerful, and we definitely need to keep it going. So we want to, first of all, do a better job at lifting y'all up. Secondly, as you know, being a mentor to so many, I was at Sincere Gaston's memorial service last week, vigil. And that's the 1-year-old that was shot and killed in Inglewood. And the theme of the vigil was enough is enough, right? We can no longer sit back and wait for someone else to do it. Enough is enough. It's our time now. Ashley said she put together a march of 5,000 in less than 2 weeks, right? Like we don't necessarily need the blueprint to do it, right? It literally, man, if I want to know how to do it, man, I can send her a DM and figure it out. Or I can do it myself. It might not be successful the first time, but at least I'll learn though, right? Now with the Obama Foundation, you can definitely go to obama.org. We have several different outlets for young people specifically. We have CLC, which is, our Chicago Community Leadership Corps. We have, MBK, My Brother's Keeper, which is an initiative for Black males. We have so many things going on. Obviously, all roads lead to the Obama Presidential Center coming to the south side of Chicago. We are currently working on that. 19.3 acres of land between 51st and 63rd and Stony Island to do two things: serve as a community anchor and a hub of civic engagement. So we are working. We are intentional. If you haven't seen me yet, you will see me soon. I'm coming to a community near you, right?
We see it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Chris. Domity, if you could hang for just a second for me, I have a question. I'd like your help in shifting to the next segment. But again, Ashley, Christopher, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
You too. Nice to meet you guys.
You too. Thanks. All right, Domity. So I have you here. As mentioned, you are the host of MTV News. You are an amazing journalist. I've only been with you maybe twice in person, but just like your energy radiates the passion that you have for your work. So I bring you here as my trusted companion to kind of talk about how realistic maybe cancel culture is, because I'm about to bring in my next set of panelists. And the reason I'm asking you this specifically is because it is my understanding that you have taken a stand and you refuse to talk about Tekashi 6ix9ine on any of your outlets. That's it, right? Gotcha. So many journalists and many news reports, whatever titles people want to take on, they're going to do it because he gets the streams, he gets the numbers. It doesn't matter what he's done to the community, for the community, like whatever. His history doesn't matter to them because he gets the clicks. So just how do you stand firm on that? And like, do you see that practice of not reporting on someone you can't just support or you don't agree with, personally, becoming the norm?
That is a great question. I didn't even know that. That's why I love What's the Word TV so much. I wasn't too loud and obvious in saying that I'm not reporting on Tekashi 6ix9ine. So the fact that you even picked up on that is ill. I think you have to be specific in what you do choose to talk about. Because if I'm not going to talk about the Tekashi story, and if that's the biggest story of the day, then whatever I'm replacing it with got to be damn good. And it has to be specific and it has to have an impact. I'm lucky in that our platform isn't driven by numbers. And the reason why first I want to talk about why Tekashi 6ix9ine is dangerous. The reason why he's dangerous is because he represents a co-opting of our culture and a weaponizing of our culture. This man is literally responsible for incarcerating all of these Black men and he used as props to prop up his career, to bolster his image, and then send them straight to jail. That's what happens with white culture when they love hip hop music, love Black music, love Black art, but hate Black people, send us to prison. And so if I ever did have to talk about Tekashi 6ix9ine, I would have to talk about him within that context. It's not just that he's a fake rapper. It's not just the snitch thing. It's not all of that. It's that he is an agent of the state at this point because he is part and parcel with mass incarceration. Like he has put these folks behind bars. So to get to your question about, is there going to be a trend? I don't know. That's almost like asking, is there going to be a trend of more people having morals of being real or standing on their word? I don't really know. I don't know. People are thirsty for clicks right now. But I think that people should be encouraged in knowing that the cream rises to the top. I've interviewed Meg Thee Stallion, DJ Khaled, Rick Ross. I've been on red carpets, been VMAs, did all that stuff. I don't give a damn about none of that. I've never been, I don't really get starstruck. You know what I'm saying? Lauryn Hill may be the only person, you know? So it's like, and so at that point, but I was discouraged when I would see that my Megan Thee Stallion clips had way more clicks than the story I did about the 1619 project. That was before the pandemic. But God has a way of creating a situation and a time for people to pay attention to the things that really matter. And what that did, that let people know that I was in tune with the culture for real. That was still valuable. And this pandemic has given voice to these George Floyd stories and these Breonna Taylor stories and these Tony McDade stories that I've been doing that folks may not have paid attention to if I didn't reel them in with the other stuff first. And so news outlets, I do think, are beginning to understand that the public appreciates nuance. And because of the moment we're in, people are Googling George Floyd. Now it's becoming profitable to talk about George Floyd because I even tell you this, MTV, the brand's channel, because I work for MTV News, they're technically two different entities. I work for both.
Okay.
The brand channel says they're only going to repost my protest stories on the MTV brand Instagram page for the foreseeable future. So if I do a story about anything else, I think I did a story about, coronavirus. They're going to support and amplify it on the Twitter account, but they're not going to amplify it on that page. Why? Not only because they have a social media manager that's passionate about these issues, but mainly because people are looking at it, is getting the clicks and is getting the attention. And whatever you feed will grow. Whatever you water will grow. If we water bullshit, bullshit is going to grow. So that's what we need to pay. So when we talk about cancel culture, sometimes we elevate people. We elevate Candace Owens by saying her name. We elevate these people and make them more powerful. And last thing I want to get to put a button on the previous thing. I know I'm talking long. I hope
okay. Come on, bring us home so I can bring up these next panelists.
Yes, 15 more seconds. Right now is the time to talk about reparations. HR 40 is a bill right now that will commission a study on reparations. As we're talking about all these other things, let's figure out how we shift our energy. Rather than cancel people, let's figure out who we can shift our energy to. Instead of talking about Tekashi 6ix9ine, let me talk about this album Wale just dropped that's about protest movements. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shift my energy to where it matters. So let's shift our energy toward reparations too, because I think that this is the moment where folks are listening to that.
I appreciate that. So let's wrap this up with takeaways. Shift energy. Don't necessarily just cancel it or spew out negative energy. Be aware that what's real may not get as much like or input or response as what's popular, but what's real is still important. And really, I think those are the main two. I mean, you hit so many gems, but I want so many people, again, both in media and not in media, feel like, well, I didn't get enough likes, or only 2 people tuned into my live when I was talking about, the effects of slavery on Black people. Doesn't make it any less important. It was still content we needed. Keep pushing, keep fighting. Domity, thank you.
Cindy, thank you.
I really appreciate you. And with that, you have a wonderful evening, my friend.
You too.
And I'm going to bring in some more guests.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So next up, we are going to talk about shifting cancel culture to counsel culture. Joining us this evening, we have veteran What's the Word journalist, Corley J.
Yo, what's up? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Corley.
Hey, Cindy.
Have licensed counselor and personality and so many other things, Miss Brittany Rogers. Hello, Brittany.
Hey.
And last but not least, Mr. Terry Roseland, who is the co-founder of FC Network. He's a podcaster, and amongst many other things, Terry's also a co-worker of mine on the Diamonds Dosage Project. Hello, Terry.
I am. What's going on? How you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. You ain't tell me how we could curse on here. I ain't know that. Shout out to Domity, man.
See, here you go. I already started. Let's save it for the next segment, okay? Let's keep this one, focused on the money, on the goals. So we understand that cancel culture is a communal decision and I use communal like this because it's usually just the Twitter community or some people up under some comments in the shade room that's just mad at this celebrity today. it's a decision of a group of people to just stop supporting someone, usually a celebrity, based on comments they made or actions that they committed that seem disloyal or not to the benefit of the larger community that they are in. Would you all say I summarized that correctly?
Yes.
Mhm.
Cool, thanks. So I want to start with Corley. Now, Corley, I'm going to share a little snippet or just kind of what your article looks like. So Corley is the author of To Cancel or Not to Cancel, The Point of Cancel Culture. Everyone watching, you can log on to what'stheword.tv, go to the features, and you'll be able to read this article in its entirety, and this feature in its entirety. But as someone who wrote that, Corley, can you talk to us about why you even felt that piece was necessary and your take on cancel culture, and if it's even a realistic solution for us as a people?
Definitely. So I wrote that article because I saw a lot of people getting canceled on Twitter daily. So it went from like Doja Cat to Jimmy Kimmel, and I think another one of the Jimmys. Wasn't it another Jimmy that got canceled on Twitter? It was like Doja Cat is over party.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think he was the other one. And it was just like every day someone's getting canceled. And then I also saw people saying, "So who's canceled today?" And so I feel like the
Looking for
opposite.
somebody, huh?
Yeah. I feel like the opposite of other people. So people think that the generation today is so sensitive and they always looking to cancel someone, right?
Mhm.
But I think that canceling is not really canceling. We just want you to know better. So cancel culture is counsel culture, because what we're basically looking for is you to feel some kind of remorse on what you did, to know what you did was wrong. It's not necessarily that it's over with for you. You're never going to have a platform, as we see, because as soon as someone's canceled, they get forgiven the next day.
Gotcha. So you meant the forgiveness the next day point. Do you think, why do you think that comes so quickly? So we can use an example from your article. Trina, she was somebody that was canceled for saying Black people looked and were acting like animals when they were looting and rioting during the George Floyd protests. But a few days later, she apologized, saying that she realized that was insensitive. She could have been better with her words. But do you really think she was forgiven? Or do you think that she was never really canceled in the first place? People just wanted to say something,
Exactly. I don't think that she was canceled in the first place. And I also feel like she probably was just speaking from what she felt from there, right? At that point. But she didn't actually mean that. I think that you can tell when someone has good intentions. And I believe that Trina had good intentions. I don't believe that she actually thinks that. And if she does think that, then she has some reading and more educating for herself to do. But it's not really that serious. I don't think that cancel culture is cancel culture.
So Terry, I'd like to bring you in. Like I mentioned, you're a podcaster and you're known for just kind of saying things that, even if they aren't really controversial, a lot of people feel that they are, or, they grab people's attention and walk the fine line of, all right, should we cancel you? Should we not cancel you? How do you mostly maintain growth and avoid being canceled in this culture?
I think that if you are in charge of your own platform, you can't be canceled. So people like Kevin Hart, he's in charge of his own platform. So he can, he gets canceled for so many different things that he's done or said, or the situation him and his wife. But since he owns the LOL network, it's like, how can you really cancel him? He doesn't have a job. He can't be fired. You get what I'm saying? So I think the people that get canceled are people who work for a company, work for an agency, or whatever that is. Like Jason Mitchell, he got canceled. Like, for real, he's canceled. The guy who played on The Shot, right? So people can be canceled. I think cancel culture is real. I just think that the way to avoid it is ownership, which is something that we're talking about right now with everything that's going on. It's Black ownership. If you own your own platform, you can't be canceled.
Do you think that it? Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy. I had a question for Terry. Do you think that cancel culture is real when it comes to the hands of certain people? Like, fans can't really cancel someone. Do you think that, or anybody can cancel anybody?
I think it depends on how big the person is and how much support they have. So some people are like Kanye, for example. His support is global. It's bigger than the Black community. So the Black community, we could be as mad as we want to be at Kanye. he's huge. You know what I mean? He has all these different communities around the globe supporting him. So it's very hard to cancel somebody like that. But somebody like Desi Banks, we probably can't cancel him because it's really just the Black community that's supporting him. So I think it is possible. It just depends on, are you solely supported by the Black community, and do you own your own platform? I think that those are the two things. But I can't really say that cancel culture is cancel culture, because I don't know what these people are learning. I think a lot of people are apologizing because they realize what they have to lose by saying what they said. But what are we teaching them? Are we correct? We should be correcting them. When Desi Banks saying the things that he's saying about looting and things like that, we should be more so focused on correcting him as opposed to canceling him. And I think that we also have to think about the media's role in all of this. Like, why? How can it's just interesting to me that somebody can be famous and we can support somebody for 10 years without knowing that they're a coon, right? Like, so like these interview questions that we asking these people, you know, they first interview is like, oh, how did you get famous? Where did you come from? It's like the same thing. And then the next time they interview is like, oh, over the last year you went viral 4 times. Let's talk about this drama. Let's talk about this beef. Let's talk about your love life. But we're never talking about how they feel about the world. So somebody like Terry Crews could be famous for 15 years. How are we just finding out that he a coon? Like, just now. Like, we should have been knew he was a coon.
A white chick should have told us that.
Man, something. So at the end of the day, it's like cancel culture is real, but let's like kind of backtrack it a little bit and figure out, like, let's get to know who we support a little bit better, so we don't have to cancel them. We can teach them early what's really going on and who's really supporting you and things like that.
So I actually want to come back to a lot of what you said, but one thing that sticks out to me is how we should talk to them. We should show them different instead of canceling. And this is where I'd like to bring Brittany into the conversation. Brittany, from a psychology standpoint, like, what would you say in your experience yields better results when you're trying to get somebody to learn from their mistakes? Do they usually learn better? Because I understand it depends on the person and, you know, different aspects of mental health, but just if you could speak generally based off of your professional experience, what usually clicks better for people? When you stop them swiftly, harsh punishment, nope, I'm done with you, not gonna happen, or when you try to talk to them and explain to them the error in their action?
I think that the reason why we see the celebrities or like these people that are in the spotlight kind of say what they want to say and then they step away and people start to drag them and then they come back into the picture and now they have an apology, it's hard to understand, like, if it's genuine or if somebody behind the scenes who really cares and knows them has sat down with them and explained to them the seriousness behind whatever it is that they've done. So again, it's like you can't really say one way or another, because we see, like, I'm not going to lie, being in quarantine, I've been on social media a lot more, on Twitter, like, you literally see people get bullied into like doing what we believe to be the right thing. And to watch that impact, it's like, you don't know if this person is doing, you know, is apologizing or taking accountability out of a place of feeling genuinely sorry and wanting to be educated, or if it's just the fact that they are just concerned, like Terry said, about the influence that could potentially have on whatever they're trying to do. Now you see people like B. Simone. Now my thing is, I think that when you have a platform, like Terry said, if you own your stuff, you can say whatever you want. There may be little subgroups that cancel you, but as a whole, it's going to be hard to just wipe you from anything, you know. But I think that when you don't have, when you're dependent on, like you said, the Black community for most of your support, like with B. Simone, people bought her books, people were really rooting for her when she was when she was trying to work her way to what was it, $1 million? When she was trying to really, you know, get in her bag, and we were pushing for her. You know, a lot of people really supported her. So when she came out and said what she said, I think the interesting thing is, initially she was trying to stand on what she said. Like, she came back and was like, I'm not apologizing. This is how I feel. You know what I mean? So for me, when I witness that, sometimes I have a sense of respect for somebody who's willing to stand on what it is that they said and not be so influenced by the fact that, oh my God, like, people are going to hate me. But at the end of the day, somebody is always going to hate you because you're in the spotlight. So like, being able to be comfortable in your own stance, even if the mass don't agree with it, so it's power behind that, you know. So sometimes that is something to be
respect it, because again, when you come back and you try to apologize, it doesn't always translate as genuine. It seems like it's the thing to do. And so I think that hopefully these people have people in their lives who are getting in their ear. It seems like nobody has a publicist anymore, because people just kind of say whatever and then they just kind of deal with the backlash. But I think we do have to have a better attitude, because if we are so quick to try to cancel somebody without giving them the opportunity to learn, because I'll admit, I've learned a lot from my social media. I learned a lot from Twitter, just based on being in this pool of people with all these different perspectives and from different backgrounds and different experiences, and people that just know more about certain shit than I do. So that can be very informative if the person is open to learning. Like, it's one thing to not know, it's another thing to not be open or willing to learn to do better. So I think that we have to remember, at the end of the day, these people are human. Like, some of them are very far removed from the lives that we live every day. So we can't expect for them to always identify with our experience. Now, sometimes people may say, like, you know, you ain't even reading the room. Like, some of them, you not to say that they don't necessarily know better, because some people do and still say it anyway. But like, some people just genuinely are removed from certain spaces where they just don't understand the thinking of what we would consider to be the mass. So I think that we do have to have a little bit more grace, because if you think about it in a personal situation or individual situation, if you didn't know something, or you got online and you tweeted something and people was like, oh my God, like, girl, no, like, and they started to drag you versus to educate you, you would get defensive, you would feel away, you wouldn't necessarily respond to that well. So I think we do have to, again, like, kind of switch perspective and think about, like, is this person really somebody, like, do we really need to go out their way to cancel them because they're uneducated? Do we not give people the room to grow when they learn better, when they can do better?
So much of what you said, my mind's just rolling. But I think that the last piece is most important. We have to shift perspective, and it brings up the point from earlier that Domity shared with us, context, right? So when these people are saying these things, instead of jumping down their throat, consider their intention, consider the context of the situation, especially if it's something we're consuming on the internet. The first question everyone needs to ask themselves is this the complete clip? Because far too often we hear sound bites. We see 10-second bits of a full minute answer. And, you know, like the people just want their clicks. They just want to go viral. Exactly. So, and for the people who are struggling and feel like, well, it's not my job to think about where the next person is coming from, they should have said it more clearly. Do it for yourself. And, you know, sorry, Mom, I know you watching. Don't be the asshole that just wants to, you know, jump down somebody's throat. Like, if you feel so strongly it's not your responsibility to worry about the next person, you should at least know it's your responsibility to worry about yourself and want to be more educated, want to be more informed, all of these things. So I mentioned that to talk about, Terry, we can come back to your point of, if you own your platform, you can't be canceled. You make me think about T.I. T.I. is somebody that every so often it's something he's done. I would say most recently, everybody kind of feel like he highlighted himself as a misogynist that many people feel he is, with the whole taking his daughter to the gynecologist situation, whatever. I'll admit, one of my favorite reality TV shows, I don't watch many, is Friends and Family Hustle. So I've actually watched and seen where he's apologized and the conversations he had and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But I mentioned all that. He has his own podcast, Expeditiously, which he actually used in addressing the situation. He brought his daughter's mom onto it. They talked about the situation. She gave perspective from the woman's side. But there are still some people who just feel like it's not enough, who just feel like this is the third or fourth time he's done something like this, like, we're done with him. However, he keeps coming up, and I'm going to ask you this just for clarification purposes. Do you really feel like that's just because he owns, you know, so much?
Yeah, because I feel like when the world is mad at somebody and you work for a company, that company is going to make you apologize or fire you. You know what I mean? So because it's all about ratings and numbers to that company. So like DJ Academics, he got suspended for a few days off of Everyday Struggle for something that he said about John Legend's wife, Chrissy Teigen. Yeah. So So yeah, if you work for somebody, then absolutely. But in T.I.'s situation, I really feel like because he owns his podcast, his core audience is going to stay there, and it's going to continue to grow.
Do you also feel though, and everyone else, please feel free to chime in, that it's not always just about if you own it. Some people just have that strong of a fan base, or so many of us in the community simply choose to ignore the actions of people because we've already idolized them as a rapper or as this. And I bring this up to mention R. Kelly. Now, that's someone who, even with the disgusting things that he's done, because if you ask me, he cancel. We ain't even playing him at the cookouts. However, there are people who still play him at the cookouts. There's people that still want to play this man at his wedding. And I get it. Everyone has, has their own opinion, whether they choose to separate the person from the music or this, that, and the other. My personal take is it's hard for me to separate him from the music, knowing that some of these sex songs were about 12-year-olds. But I mentioned that to say, even with these things, the lewd acts, this isn't just making some insensitive comment. People are still so driven and so attached to this name, to this person, to this man. So how do we work some of those barriers? How do we get people to overcome their personal emotional attachments and realize the need to call people out and hold them accountable in public spaces so that as a community we can move forward? And we can start with you, Brittany.
So I think the key word of what you said was attachments. Like when we are bonded with something, when we are attached with something, whether it be a person, a figure, just anything at that point, it becomes very difficult for people to let that go. And, when you think of music, it's like, well, just don't play it. But again, like, music also acts as like time capsules for people. So music holds memories, and music holds good, feels and energy that people really respond to. And so, again, I think that unfortunately with R. Kelly, he's been enmeshed in the Black culture and a part of so many of our moments and our experiences. And I sung I Believe I Can Fly at my kindergarten graduation, like all of these little things that people, like, he's just been attached and influenced in throughout our community, where for a lot of people, they can't fathom, like, people don't like change. We don't like when things shift. So like to fathom that I have to like be intentional about listening to somebody, but a lot of people, it's too much work. I'd rather just let it play, and if he come on, then okay, whatever. Like they don't feel unfortunately, a lot of people, because they have their own feelings about sexual assault and abuse as a whole, and it may not be on the morally right side of things, So for them, their perception of like how impactful what he has done is different. Like I've literally sat with people like probably a conversation with some of Terry and his people, where a lot of them have strong feelings about R. Kelly, and it ain't that bad, and when they do it this way, it's just so many reasons. But people that hang
on my network,
podcast network, right? So I think that to get us all on the same page, I think in any community, because I know people are quick to say the Black community, we can't never sit together. There are other communities who have their issues where they can't be 100% bonded. And so I think that unfortunately, this is just an area where we see that the most, where it's very clear for a bunch of people that this is somebody that we shouldn't affiliate with, that we should continue to try to hold accountable for the things that they've done. But then you always are going to have those outliers who, again, like that attachment, that bond is so strong, or again, it's so enrooted in a part of their experience in their life, where it just don't seem worth it to them.
Mm-hmm. Corley, do you have any thoughts? I know that this has been, an internal conversation we've had before. I think it speaks to some of the points you made in your article as well, but can you kind of highlight them for us?
I think, me personally, I do separate the artist from the art, because I feel like music or the art didn't hurt anybody, and the person is the one at fault. In R. Kelly's case, we see him paying for what he's done. And we also see that he doesn't even own his music. So that's a totally different thing. So when you are listening to that music, he's not the one that's getting the credit for it or getting paid from the listenership. And I would compare it to Terry Crews. Would you not watch Everybody Hates Chris anymore because you don't agree with him, like him being a coon and everything? I feel like it's two totally different things, and I can understand if it's too hard for you. I would never try to say you should listen to it because it's two different things. Because I totally understand where you're coming from, and that's part of cancel culture. That's why I feel like it's not real. Some people are going to fully support that, and some people aren't, and so that's what splits it.
I appreciate you spewing in that you feel like cancel culture isn't real, because as we're having this conversation, it's kind of what we're all touching on. Like, we understand how it works, how it's supposed to be, but there are so many different varying factors, especially if this is something we're supposed to do as a community, that stops it from being able to truly reach its purpose. So with that, and I want to begin shifting away from celebrities, and our action points will be about, us as everyday people and what we can do and how we can shift from cancel to council culture in our households, honestly. But before jumping into that, Terry Crews keeps coming up. And Nick Cannon is actually like one of the first people I heard even mention this whole idea of council culture in comparison to cancel culture. And he actually had T.I. on he had him on, I think, Nick Cannon Radio, but he also had an episode of Cannon's Class where he brings up people like Terry Crews. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is Terry Crews is just somebody who just doesn't seem to learn from their mistakes. Like, he just keeps hopping on Twitter. So at that point, what do we do with those people in our community? Like, is that a thing of, all right, we gave you a couple chances, now you canceled for real? Or is that a thing of, we have to keep fighting and really try? You can't make people see where you're coming from, but you can do your best to communicate effectively. So what would you all say is how do we treat those scenarios? Terry?
That's tough, because like you said, you can't make people stop supporting somebody. You can't make people, like Corley said, you can't make somebody stop watching Everybody Hates Chris if Terry Crews continues to go on multiple rants and just continues to coon. You can't make people stop supporting it. I think we have to focus on the actual values, right? So getting people to value the things that these people are standing against. So if somebody says something that's misogynist, getting people to value the female experience, the woman's experience in America, you know what I mean? Especially the Black woman's experience. So I bring up somebody like Joe Budden, right? So it's like he's singing he could be as misogynist as he wants on his show because that's his target audience, is men. You get what I'm saying? So if we have to get those men to value the values of women, to get them to stop being misogynist. You know what I mean? So once that stops and the audience changes, they'll either stop supporting him or he'll change his tune, because he sees that his audience is changing. But we can't just get people to, stop liking what you like because we don't like it. Like, that's not gonna work.
I think that it comes with just ignoring. Like, I think Dementi made that point of when someone is canceled, we continue to talk about them, and that makes them trend. And I think that part of cancel culture should be you ignoring them. That's when you really become canceled. We're not looking at what you're saying anymore. Even if you want to continue to support their movies, support their shows, just know that you're not part of the conversation. And what you're saying is not going to be seen as valuable, because we know that you can't be taken serious in Terry Crews' case.
So it's my job to connect the dots tonight. And I think what you both just said, ties into things mentioned from the first segment. So the idea of just taking initiative. Corley's way of doing is taking initiative, ignoring them, forgetting it. Like, don't even fuel the fire, just move on. Like, even if that's the action choice, it's rooted in taking initiative to do so. Terry, you mentioned bringing value to the experience that's being condemned or overlooked or mistreated. That's a theme for us as Black people right now. Like, We've been mistreated for so long. So now that's what not only we have to take the initiative to do, but as we mentioned, get these leaders, get these executives, these CEOs, everybody else to add and not even so much add, because we have enough value on our own. I have to be selective in my words, but bring and shine light on the value of the Black experience. So moving into how we make this more of a realistic thing, an everyday thing, how we can practice council culture in our homes as a people, helping each other, lifting each other up. Brittany, can you share some tips with us of how to talk to a loved one that we see is problematic, whether they're problematic on social media, whether they're problematic in our households? What are some effective ways to communicate with them and to kind of shape council culture in our everyday experience?
I think people have to approach situations like that with patience first and foremost, but also with the understanding that you could explain this the best way possible, and that person could still feel the way that they feel. They could still do the things that they do. They could still say the things that they say. So we have to really think about, like, where does our control lie, so that we don't allow ourselves to get upset and overly emotional and invested and angry and frustrated with this person. Because most of the time, when it comes to somebody close to us, it becomes a, how they are. Black people good for like passing off that relative that they are just, everybody's so tired of trying to hold accountable or trying to get the change, where they've just kind of accepted that person for where they are. And sometimes that's the hard part. And sometimes because we cannot make anybody do anything. And the older you get, that's I think the most common situation I see with, millennials and our parents, which is the fact that it was a different time. And the older you become, the more stuck in your ways and stuck in your thinking and your beliefs and your values and your perspectives, the more bonded you are to those. So the less likely you are to change. Like right now, this is, the 20s, our 30s, like this is prime time for us to like be unlearning and teaching ourselves new things. And like really just, I think millennials, we are taking that by storm of really trying to assess like how we want to do things differently for the next generations, and the things that are problematic that we were raised to normalize and believe that is okay. So unfortunately, like, I always encourage people to have the conversation, but before having the conversation, really think about like your audience. What is the best way I can get this person to receive this, and not be driven by ego of, oh, I just need to prove them wrong, or I need to show them why they're wrong. Like that attitude, people get defensive, people shut down, and then people don't want to engage anymore. So you get nowhere. So you really have to approach it with some grace and some understanding of like, what could this person be experiencing, or what could they have been through that has shaped their way of being or their opinions and all of that, because all of that influences things. So you can't expect somebody to love apples if they was raised loving oranges, and that was the only thing that they knew. You know what I mean? So you have to have a little bit of compassion, and then you also have to honor your own limits and implement your own boundaries if that's just a person who you cannot seem to have, certain cohesive or productive conversations with. Because I think that's where the conflict comes. Like, well, I'm just not going to talk to you. Sometimes people are in our lives, and we have to figure out how to make room for them in a way that is healthy for us, but not necessarily to the point where we are exhausted from, certain conversations around certain topics with somebody else, and just knowing their beliefs. So a part of it, you got to know who you're talking to. You got to know how is it, even if it means you humbling yourself, you stroking their ego a little bit to teach them something or to make something appeal to them in a way that you know that they're going to receive it. But you definitely can't go in there with, I told you so, or this is, or condescending, because people, they're just not going to respond to that. So it really has to come from a place of wanting to teach.
Thank you for giving realistic tips and like realistic approaches and things to think about. I especially appreciate how you mentioned boundaries. And just to quickly expound on that, I think you not only need to set boundaries for yourself or for the conversation and understanding what you're walking into, but those boundaries can apply to when you got to the point with the person where you just know they aren't going to change. You don't have to just pass it off with, that's just how they are, or that's just my uncle, or that's just my auntie, so I gotta call my auntie, or I don't have to call my uncle if if he's a misogynist or he makes me uncomfortable, or we know that he's the family pedophile. Like, I'm not encouraging none of that. And I hope everyone watching understands that that is okay. So thank you, Brittany. And to bring the rest of us home and shift into our last segment for the evening, Terry, if you could leave us with some thoughts about just, because you're someone who navigates a platform, how being over a platform can we or you or whoever who has one navigate responsibly when they are dealing with someone with maybe non-progressive views or someone with a history of lewd remarks, because that happens in media. You know, you have to take interviews sometimes that maybe you don't agree with that person. So how can you responsibly navigate those conversations?
For me, when I come in contact with somebody who has a opinion that's just like out of the park, like ridiculous, for me, I have to remember that me disagreeing with him is just my opinion as well. And I also have to think about the root of why this person is saying what they're saying. So if somebody like, for example, 50 Cent says, I like exotic women and not angry black women, right? He said what he said. I can't get him to, that's what he feels, right? He said what he says. But how did you get to this thought? Well, how did you grow up? Like, what did you see growing up that led you to this place where you feel this way and you feel like, you know, and you're categorizing women this way? So if we could talk about that, then I feel like we could deal with it a lot more responsibly than just arguing over the stand, like whatever stance that you just threw out there. Because this wild opinion or this wild thought that you just threw out is really just a branch of like this deeply rooted tree. You know what I'm saying? So you could, this isn't the only wild opinion that you're going to say. That's why you keep seeing these people come back, T.I. and Terry Crews, and just to keep saying wild stuff. It's deeper than what they actually just said. It's like some whole other stuff that they came up seeing or dealing with or whatever that's making them feel this way. So the only way we're going to deal with it progressively and responsibly is to talk about that, in my opinion.
No, I think your opinion is, again, full of gems. You all are just dropping knowledge tonight. And I think it shifts, again, an action point. Focus on the how. You know, it's more so like how they tell you, listen to understand, not to respond. So when you heard that, you go into understanding mode versus, oh, you tripping, dog. Don't call, you know, black women angry. Like, you're probably not going to shift his opinion. But if you can understand it, even if you can't help him to change later, you can help the next person maybe that thinks the same way to see, because now you know what's at the root of it. And I want to encourage all of us to apply that same concept, not only to our fight for justice, but in our households, in our personal relationships, romantic or platonic. Like, you know, I know in romantic relationships, they tell you all the time, don't fight the other person, fight the problem together. You know, like it. So use that everywhere else as well. And so, Coralie, bring us home. Are there any just general thoughts you have on what we're talking about right now? And specifically, what would you say you want the key takeaway of your piece about cancel culture and just the idea of cancel culture as a whole to be, as someone, you know, who is a journalist and constantly seeing and experiencing this on social media?
I personally believe that cancel culture is reform culture. I believe that in canceling someone, we are letting them know what they did wrong and why it is wrong. And it's up to that person to take it or leave it. And that was my whole point of the article. And that's why I kind of believe that cancel culture isn't real, because I believe that it is reform culture. And we're just trying to get people to correct their mistakes, to understand where they went wrong.
And that might be why, like the point of why we're doing it should probably be why we should switch the name, because cancel culture sounds so harsh. It sounds so, I'm done with you.
I understand, but at the same time, it should be kind of harsh, because you should know what you did was kind of messed up. But at the same time, we ain't really canceling you.
You should, but everybody does it. And we can't judge people maybe off of how they learn or how slow they are at picking up a concept. You know, as a people, we have to work together to uplift and to help them be a little quicker next time and get in.
Yeah, I definitely agree though.
Yeah. And last thing I want to say, Cindy, is I think to connect what Terry and what Coralie just said is like, our power lies in we determine what we consume. So we can't control other people, but like if I decide that, you know, okay, 50 Cent has just done too much, I just can't do it. I just can, like she said, I kind of ignore, like there's certain things that pop up on my timeline that I just filter out of my head because I have no interest in supporting giving it any energy. Trump, I couldn't tell you what Trump tweeted the first however many years he's been in office because I don't look at it. I don't read it. I scroll.
You don't follow him.
I just don't engage with it because, again, you see people in these comments who are so emotionally invested, and I can only imagine what type of agitation and stress that like brings into your life for no reason. So
to that, because I was gonna say my last words were gonna be based off what you're saying. Unfollow the Shade Room and stop listening to the Breakfast Club. They are problematic to the Black community. That's a conversation for a whole nother day. So I don't want to get into it for time's sake. But thank you all so much for sharing, ladies. Terry, you can hang out with me. You're a part of the next and last segment of this evening. But Brittany, thank you so much for your professional take this evening. Corley, thank you for coming in and breaking down your article, giving us tips, sharing your opinions. I truly appreciate both of you ladies. You all have a great evening.
Thanks.
Me too.
All right, Terry, what's up? So we're going to bring in the lovely Robin Neal, who is a digital marketing coordinator. Hello, Robin. Also, I don't want to call you a personality, but Robin has her own series of live talks that she does with influencers and professionals in various industries as well. And then we want to bring in a member of the home team, the lovely Diamond's Dosage. Hello, good evening. How are you, Miss Diamond? Personality and podcaster. So for now, it's just us four. It may end that way, but we're gonna jump into Black men versus Black women, the battle of protection. So I want to start this.
3-on-1?
Huh?
3-on-1?
Am I online?
It's not a battle.
3-on-1?
Oh, no. So yeah, we're waiting on another panelist, but you know the show must go on. We did have a guy to help you out, but I have faith in us ladies, and I think that we won't be giving biased standpoints, just facts. So Terry, you be all right, you got this. But that's a good point you mentioned in the battle. That's why I wanted to start the segment. I don't want battle to be the word we focus on. Like that's just the title of this specific segment for the sake of that's kind of what we've been seeing, especially as millennials or avid social media users. It's been framed as a battle online. So to provide some context, some of the issues that we've seen kind of get brought up. I think last month there was a viral video of a group of Black men in DC who threw a Black woman into the garbage can, and they stood around and laughed at her and mocked her. There's constant talk, which there needs to be, about the negligence of Black men protecting Black trans women. You know, this whole idea that trans women aren't women. Like, it doesn't really matter where you align. If that's a woman, she needs your protection too. So I want to bring all these up, and I'm going to start in. I'm going to share a tweet with you all. Give me 1 second. It is about... where'd it go? Because that's not it. Okay, well, it's about misogyny. And so what it is, it talks about how it says, imagine claiming that Black women are causing division by calling out misogyny rather than the men who are being misogynistic. And Terry, we can start with you. No funny business about letting the man lead the segment. But if you could share with me, what do you take away from that tweet? How do you feel about it?
It sounds like it's a little bit of feedback. Can you repeat that?
I don't know where it's coming from. So I'm going to mute you all for now. But the tweet was, imagine claiming that Black women are causing division by calling out misogyny rather than the men who are being misogynistic.
Okay, so I just learned a new term called gaslighting, and I think that's what that is. Am I right? All right. Okay, cool. I knew that y'all would know. I learned it from a woman. Huh?
What do you think? What are you asking me? Is gaslighting?
Is exactly what you just said. So basically, making somebody feel like they're crazy for calling out something that you did to them.
Basically, so, you're trying to alter their reality or their experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just an accountability issue. And just like we spoke on the last segment, people get defensive when they get called out. When I first got to college, I joined a group called PMM, like Progressive Masculinity Mentors, I believe it was. And they started talking about male privilege, a concept I've never heard before. I'm 21 years old. I've never heard the concept of male privilege. And it was very hard to accept up front. that group of men it was like 12 of us. So if this is my first time hearing it, there's only 12 men in this room, I can imagine that probably 90% of men, even if they have heard of male privilege, probably don't really believe it exists, especially Black men, because we are super oppressed ourselves. That it takes a lot of accountability and a lot of humility to be able to believe that you're oppressing other people, that you're oppressing women. It's hard for a lot of men to believe that, and we live in a patriarchal society. A lot of men, including myself, are probably inherently sexist, inherently misogynist, because of we are products of the society that we're born into. We're taught this in our daily lives. You know what I mean? It's almost like how it's okay in most Black families for a girl to be a tomboy, but not the other way around, right? So it's okay and it kind of just sends the message like it's okay to be a boy, it's not okay to be a girl. You know what I mean? So I think that to make men be accountable for misogyny, it's you got to start early. You got to start with the babies. Like they say, it's a lot easier to build strong kids than to repair broken men, right? So you talking to somebody that's 29, 30 years old about something that he's learned from his whole life from his environment. That's very hard to reverse. I'm not saying it's impossible, and some progress can be made, but it's definitely an uphill battle.
Thank you. And I say thank you because I think most people would expect you to kind of have a rebuttal to that tweet, whereas you affirmed it. And I think that is key in the fight of getting Black men and Black women more aligned, being able to be a part of the other side that's getting the blame and hold that side accountable. So as I bring Diamond and Robin in, I would like to also kind of bring up, because Terry, you hit a number of points and you actually kind of jumped ahead. I want to talk about Black male privilege and how it exists in comparison to Black women. But before we get there, or kind of to help us transition into it, I can think of a recent example of J. Cole and No Name, and how J. Cole makes this song, and we're supposed to understand that his intention was just to get a sister to educate us. And No Name, and honestly, everybody who listens kind of like, you tweaking, dog. You know, like that's not how this works. So I would like to hand the floor over to Diamond. Are you familiar with that situation?
I am, yes.
So can you summarize for us why majority of people felt, especially women, felt that what J. Cole did was problematic?
Honestly, because I feel like he wanted to be coddled. Like a lot of Black men want to be coddled by Black women. This woman, No Name, has taken her time to educate herself, educate her fan base. She started a book club. Like, I don't understand why J. Cole felt so disrespected by her attempts to educate the population. Not only educating herself, but educating the population, something that he should have done. And also, it's so much going on in the world right now, like as far as, you know, these Black women are being killed, these Black men are being killed, you know, capitalism, racism, all of these things. And then he took his time to take a shot at a Black woman who was trying to help the cause and not hurt it. So it's like, that was really confusing to me. I didn't understand that. I didn't like that.
Robin, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
And
I think you have headphones maybe, because we're getting the feedback from you, Robin.
Oh.
Let's see if that helps. Okay, now talk. I think you clicked. I think you cured it. I can't hear you, but I don't hear feedback.
Good.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little delayed, but we can hear you. So please just feel free to chime in.
No worries. So with that, a lot that I see happening, and I definitely agree with Diamond in the sense that he publicly put her on blast in a song about something that she mentioned. And I feel like when it comes to these topics, whether it be Black man versus Black female, and I don't want to say versus because that's not the word I'm necessarily looking for, but if we have different opinions on something, it shouldn't be talked about publicly. If you have a different viewpoint than her, then talk to her privately. But I think a lot of times now with social media and songs and people saying that their music or their art form is their outlet, they do use that as an outlet, but there are conversations that you can have privately with people to have those discussions instead of putting her on blast and then in turn causing a like back and forth between two prominent people. That's a conversation that could have been had elsewhere.
So I do agree that some conversations are better off behind closed doors. However, I want to harp on that a little, and I want to ask you about what about the situations where the mistake or the issue, or even if it isn't something negative, but just the context of what's going on, the original factor of it happens publicly. And I ask this because I've heard the response from so many Black men that as Black women, we aren't protecting them by calling them out on social media, by saying publicly that they don't protect us. You know, we're demeaning them by doing that. But if so many, going back to the example of the viral video, if so many examples have been done publicly, then does it not make sense to address someone publicly?
Good question. I personally, just from my perspective, if there's something that I have an issue with that I see someone post or comment on or publicize on their page, I want to personally go to them because I want to have the conversation. I don't need an audience to do that. I don't need anyone else to chime in and have my back. That's something that I can do on my own in a conversation that I can have with them. Now, some people do take the route of having that conversation publicly. That's just not how I would want to handle it, because I want to use it as an education piece, not both of us trying to out-talk the other or prove that our viewpoint is correct. That isn't what I'm trying to do. It's not a who's right versus who's wrong. For me, it's about educating them, whether that be publicly or privately, but I prefer to take the private route.
Gotcha. So opening this question up to Terry and Diamond as well, in the event, because Robin makes a good point, it's about educating someone. But there's a good chance that the person who posted this misogynistic tweet or made these racist remarks or whatever has a bunch of people following them that feels that same way. So if you try to school them in a platform where, you know, somebody else can't see it, is that ultimately passing up an opportunity to help educate others? Because I would like to think that, because I agree, don't get me wrong, Robin, I do agree that it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about getting to the root of the problem. However, if I can educate 5 people versus 1, is that not the better result? Diamond, Terry, do you all have any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely feel like, especially on certain platforms like Twitter and Facebook, where there's a lot of conversation, a lot of like societal issues type conversation, as opposed to a place like Instagram. When you have that debate in public in a comment section, I've learned so much by reading other people's comments. Like, I've learned so much about reading other people's comments on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm just reading a back and forth between two people, and people are dropping facts, people are dropping like links to different stuff. Like, so yeah, you can educate, and you might not change that person's mind that you're having a disagreement with, but you might educate some people that's reading through. They might not comment, they might not like anything, they just sitting at home, and you never know how many people that reached that didn't even make an impression on that actual post. And kind of going, kind of backtracking a tad bit for a second with the J. Cole thing. I really want to say this. I didn't get it, right? As a man, I did not get it. The J. Cole song. I'm gonna be completely honest with y'all. I listened to the song and I'm like, I don't get how this is a shot at this person. It sounds very humble. He's saying he's not educated and all of these things. But after you talk to so many women,
May I jump in really quick?
Go ahead.
I just want to provide context for those who may not be familiar with the song. The root of the issue was, in the song, J. Cole asked a woman artist to basically do better at educating the Black community. He complimented her, said she was smart, she has all these resources, but basically told her she needs to do a better job at sharing them with the world. And like Terry said, he humbled himself, said that he wanted to know more, and he wants her to teach him more. So that's the context of the song. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, for me, like, even though I didn't get it, after hearing so many women say that the song is bad, at some point you just have to listen. You just have to take the back seat and say, okay, because of my privilege, I might never get it. And it's just the same as, you know, a white person dealing with a black person and saying like, oh, well, these black people made it out the hood. Why can't you? Bro, you never gonna understand because you're not here. So you just got to take that back seat sometime and just trust that what I'm saying is really going on. So even though I still don't 100% get it, I feel like, you know, I'm just gonna like take that back seat, like, okay, this is not my battle. It may not be for me to understand, but I gotta just, you know, take that back seat and listen sometimes.
So we have a comment. It says he set an expectation, and he is referring to J. Cole, that a black woman was supposed to teach him when he has the same resources as her to learn on his own. And I think that highlights the point that Diamond made earlier about coddling and how so often, you know, men want to be coddled by women. It's our responsibility to do X, Y, and Z, things that they could do for themselves, quite honestly. So I want to shift the conversation a bit and talk about this privilege that Terry keeps mentioning. I'm gonna try my share tweet thing again with y'all. We'll start with one that I saw. Actually, a friend of mine, I went to college with him, dope creative. I'm sorry, multiple things popped up. So Mike B, he shared, black women in particular have to work twice as hard as us black men to achieve the same accolades. Mind you, we already have to work twice as hard as our white counterparts. So yes, they work 4 times as hard for the same level of respect professionally. Now, before we discuss that one, I have one more for you all. And this one was shared. It's not, Chance didn't write this himself. You can see the profile that it came from, but it was shared on Chance the Rapper's Instagram. And the summary of this, because this is a bit lengthy, but it talks about how white women and black men kind of have it both ways. They share the ability to act as the oppressor or the person who is oppressed. And I stress ability because I know some people read this and were like, how can you call a black man an oppressor? You know, he's been oppressed his whole life. That's not necessarily what this is saying. It's saying that because a black man is a man, they have the option to choose in their favor when they want to be the oppressor. And an example of that is in this conversation of black men protecting black women. They don't always, you know, stand up. They use that male privilege to get ahead, maybe in the professional setting or in the social setting. A black man could step up and stop his friend from, you know, sexualizing or touching, you know, this young lady inappropriately. But he a man. That's what men do. So in that moment, instead, he sits in his male privilege and ignores that. So Robin, let's come back to you, bring you back in a little bit. What is your take on these tweets, and how do you feel as a black woman hearing someone else say that black men can't have it both ways if they want?
I saw Mike B tweet that and completely agreed. I think as black women, I don't want to say we're at the bottom of the bottom, but people view us as the bottom of the bottom, right? And I saw a quote that said, if black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression, right? Meaning that if we at the very bottom were finally able to be free, everyone else would like have to finally realize that they were oppressing us from the get-go. And he did say it very well. And me as a woman in sports, I am one of only or one of few most of the time. And even though I worked my butt off and like I've done everything I was supposed to do, if I'm ever put up against a white male, and that has been the case in certain situations, they sometimes do choose them. In this instance, I was chosen for the specific role that I have, but I do have to work twice as hard or reach out to these people or make this contact, whereas they can just call a father or an uncle or a cousin, whoever it may be. But I have to put in so much work, especially in the field that I am in, and not just me, but you all as well, just to like make our voices be heard and let it know that it's because we're working hard, not because they're trying to fill some type of status quo.
Can I say something?
Yes, I was gonna ask you, do you have any thoughts?
Girl, you know I got them thoughts.
But
I just want to say that people don't understand like how many battles black women actually fight, especially in the middle of a pandemic right now. So it's like Black women fight health crises, you know, when they go to the doctor. We're not taken seriously. That's a thing. Black women are fighting racism. Black women are fighting sexual assault and violence against Black men. So it's so many battles that Black women are fighting, and we're not respected. Like we gave birth to this entire world, and we are at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to respect. Like Malcolm X said, like Black women are the most disrespected, you know, human that on earth right now, and it's because we are marginalized because we're two minorities. We're Black and we're women. So no one ever listens to us, but they copy us daily, all the time, every day. So it's just like, and then when we come to our Black men, we look to our Black men to lead us, but we're getting called bitches and hoes and this misogynistic music, and we're getting, you know, domestic violence is at an all-time high for Black women, getting beat on by their Black men. It's like, we don't feel protected. We don't feel protected at all. So where do we go? Like, what do we do?
So I think, and Terry, I want to wheel you in back here, but I want to begin, and this hurts me to say, to get to the action points, because the action points are kind of like the last of our segment, but I think that's what's most important. And I think we've identified the issue. I would like to say that this is a conversation that I don't think is what it is, rather, that'll be easier to say, is it's so deep that we need probably this whole time, you know, not just a segment for it. So that is something that I want to put in people's heads. Don't let the conversation stop here. We may even run it back for y'all because there's so much to talk about. But Terry, kind of shifting into the action points as you understand the problem. And again, you know, thank you, because I do think that you are in the minority group of Black men. So I hope that your initiative and your leadership can flow over to the majority. How do you foresee then ways for Black men to protect Black women? What can you do personally, or people like you know, your friends, your family, that will help in the fight of protecting Black women, and just any other input you have on that before I get too deep?
I just think it all started with a mind state. It all started with a mind state of understanding where you stand in the world, and a lot of people just don't. So what did it for me was the mind state of, what do I worry about when I walk down the street? I might worry about the police, like every Black person does. I might worry about being robbed in some neighborhoods, like every Black person does. I've never worried about being raped, like a day in my life. I'll never know what that feels like. I've never worried about being kidnapped a day in my life. I'll never know what that feels like. I've never went to a mechanic and thought that he might cheat me out of my money because I'm a man, or he might, you know, or somebody come work on my house, they might try to finesse me because I'm a man. Now they might try to finesse me because they're greedy, but they're not gonna try to finesse me because I'm a man. You get what I'm saying? So it's so many things that like I'll never experience because I'm a man. Like I'll never have to worry about it a day in my life. And Black women have to deal with that every single day, on top of the things that I deal with because I'm Black, like on top of those things. So, and then as Diamond touched on the health crisis, that's something it's just so many things that we never even think about. So I think starting at a place where understanding that, like, you really do have a privilege, I think that's step one. And I would say that's my only action step, because you got to get there before you could do anything else as far as like actually caring to protect, and it has to go above protecting just the people, the women you love and the women that you like and are attracted to. Because I was in a group with some progressive minded men, and a guy was laughing at the fact that he was saying that his woman runs his girl runs his household, and he was laughing at the fact. And another guy was like, it's kind of misogynist that you even think that that's funny, that you have to say that in a humorous way. And he was like, well, I came a long way. It took me until I really fell in love to start to like really understand and have a true respect for women. And the guy, and I thought that was kind of valid. And then the guy's response was like, if you got to be in love with a woman to respect her, that's fucked up. And I'm like, damn, that's true. Like, you know what I'm saying? So this is like I said, we're in a society that we're inherently sexual. We have a lot of undoing, but I think step one is really understanding, like, when you walk through the world every day, what do you have to deal with? What are the things that you don't have to deal with, you don't have to ever understand or worry about, that Black women do? I think if you start there, it'll be a lot easier on that path to protecting Black women.
To your example, I wanted to jump in so bad. while I agree with the latter gentleman that it is kind of messed up that you have to fall in love to see it, I don't want to condemn the first person's experience, because it's important and it's a key factor in reforming our culture, in reforming ourselves, and so much to understand that our individual experiences differ, even though our collective experience, looks the same as far as racism, sexism, etc. But if that's what it took for that one person to get it, that's okay. What should be more focused on is making sure, if he has a son one day, that it doesn't take his son to fall in love to get it. His son should get it, from a young age, that you respect women regardless. And to the point that you made about, not just respecting women that you're attracted to or that you're related to, again, that hones in on the trans women conversation. Most men feel that if you like a trans woman, you're gay. That's a conversation for another day, because I disagree. From what I am taught, and I understand where I stand, a trans woman is a woman. And what we are taught in general is a male attracted to a woman is straight. But I know I just opened a whole can of worms with that one that we won't dive into today, especially before these comments get to going crazy. But it's still important to say, to drive home the fact that it does not matter what that woman looks like. It does not matter what she has been through. It does not matter where she comes from. She is a woman that needs your protection and your support. That should be all that matters. And I understand there are extenuating circumstances, if somebody did something crazy to your family, whatever, like there's always little pieces that people have to consider for their individual experiences, but please don't undermine the general concept here. So ladies, you bringing us home, how do we overcome, I was going to say overcoming kind of the narrative that, black men don't support us and all we do is bash black men. I don't even think that's really the latter is a narrative, rather. I think that what we've been seeing on social media when black men talk about we don't support them or uplift them, that's just been the response to us calling them out on how they could do better. So what I would like you all to speak on and bring us home with is, what does protection from black men look like for you and for other black women that What are some tips we can give out, and how can we help to bridge this gap between us? Robin, want to start first?
Oh, Diamond, you're ready. You can go for it, girl.
Oh, go ahead, Diamond.
Well, I do just want to say, we have first accountability. I want men to reflect on the situations where they made a woman feel uncomfortable, or they allowed their friend to make a woman feel uncomfortable. That's number one. We need men to be accountable. And that's why, what you were saying, Sydney, when we hold them accountable, they become so defensive and they say that we're bashing them, but really it's an accountability thing. And I also want men to stop dismissing the experiences of black women. If she tells you this is happening or this has happened to her, it happened. Like you said previously, so many women protected, even women and men, because women are part of misogyny as well, protected R. Kelly when, he had his whole trial going on, or Mike Tyson when he had the rape case going on. So we have to stop denying the experiences of black women, and take accountability. And number three, and I think that these conversations are important. This is where it starts. We have to have these conversations with one another to get to the bottom of the issue. So I think we're doing a good job already, honestly.
You said two things that I was going to say, exactly: accountability and conversations. Accountability for sure. Terry, you said it in one of your podcasts that I listened to. You said women don't hold men accountable for their actions. And I think we need to start doing that. It's not us trying to argue. It's not us being angry or us trying to bash you. We're really just trying to understand, at least from my viewpoint. Diamond's very vocal on social media. I'm always watching things that she's tweeting because a lot of it is really true. And it is about accountability and having those conversations. And what I like about you, Diamond, got to praise you real fast. You have no problem speaking your mind on whatever it is, regardless of whatever the backlash may be from men, women, whatever that is. But it sparks conversation. And I think that's the important part, and why you touched on that as well. It's about having those conversations and it not being a back and forth or an argument, but truly trying to understand one another, where we came from and why we are who we are. If we really had those conversations and tried to get to the root of that, it would make things, I think, a lot simpler, will allow us to understand each other. We'd be able to figure out how we can be there for one another, how we can encourage each other and lift one another up. But it's just so much of people thinking that it's bashing instead of us really having genuine conversations.
Can I just say one last thing? I'm so sorry.
Go for it, Miss
I get to talk. But I just want to say that we also have to get rid of narratives of each other, like each gender. Like we have to get rid of the stereotypes and just see each other as human beings, because we all have our wants, needs, desires, problems. We are just human beings. And I want men to see women as human beings, not as their mama, not as their fairy godmama, not as somebody that's going to come and kill them and save them. No, we're human, just like men. And I want men to see. That's all. You know.
Well, no, I appreciate that ending bit. And I think one last great ending bit to what Robin said is, you know, she mentioned how we're not trying to come and nag. We're not trying to argue. We're not this. Accountability goes both ways. I want women as a whole, and not just only women, but speaking to when women are communicating to men about what they need, remember to hold yourself accountable in your approach. You might not be nagging, but if you come to me in a nagging tone or, you know, with a nagging attitude, it's hard for me to see past that. I don't hear the words you're saying. I just see the energy around it. So consider that as well. And with that, I want to thank you all so much. Again, this was not nearly enough time for this segment. So we might have to run back a part 2 or something. I don't know. We're gonna go get the creative juices flowing. Terry, give you some support. You know, you didn't even need it. I told you was gonna hold it down. Did great. I think you might got a couple fellas mad at you, but stand strong in that platform. They'll be all right.
Happens.
So again, thank you all for joining me this evening. You all have a wonderful night.
You too.
Thanks for having us, Cindy.
No problem. And to all of my viewers, thank you so much for your understanding that these topics are dense. These are the conversations that as a community we need to have, and they take time. So I know we're almost at the 2-hour mark, but we won't hit it. And I appreciate you for hanging in there with me, with the panelists, to everybody that was a part of this tonight. Thank you, and have a great night. Be safe. Please remember the action points we gave you all tonight. You can go to whatstheword.tv to constantly see more content like this. Follow me, follow the panelists. You can find a trailway to all of us from the What's the Word Instagram. So have a great night, everybody. Thank you and be blessed.